The gunshot echoed across the arid plains of Montana Territory, 1878, as Willow Patterson ducked behind her father's weathered barn, cursing the name Foster Lancaster with every fiber of her being. Another bullet splintered the wood just inches from her head, sending her heart racing as dust and debris rained down upon her auburn hair. This was the third raid on Patterson land this month, and with her father bedridden from the last attack, Willow knew something had to change before the feud claimed another life. "Miss Patterson, you can't hide forever." The voice belonged to one of the Lancaster ranch hands, another faceless soldier in the decade-long war between the two most powerful ranching families in Silver Creek Valley. Willow checked the ammunition in her father's rifle, steeling herself as hoofbeats thundered away. The Lancaster men were retreating, but they'd be back. They always came back. When she was certain they were gone, she made her way back to the main house, her boots kicking up dust along the path her grandfather had cleared 30 years ago when he'd claimed this land. Inside, she found her father, once the formidable William Patterson, propped up on pillows, his face ashen beneath his silver-streaked beard. "They came again," he wheezed, his eyes finding hers immediately. "Anyone hurt?" "No, Pa, everyone's fine." Willow set the rifle aside and poured fresh water into the basin by his bed. "But we can't keep living like this." Her father sighed, the sound rattling in his chest. The bullet that had struck him 6 weeks ago had missed his heart by inches, but the resulting infection had nearly claimed him anyway. "The Lancasters won't stop until they have our water rights. They never will. Then perhaps we need to try something different." Willow wrung out a cloth and placed it on her father's forehead, an idea forming in her mind, a desperate, wild idea that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "What if I went to see old man Lancaster myself?" William Patterson's eyes widened. "Absolutely not. That man would sooner shoot you than look at you. Not if I brought a proposal that could end this foolishness once and for all." Willow sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. "Pa, we're running out of options. We've lost 3 good men this year. The cattle are spooked from the gunfire and you're—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Her father reached for her hand, his grip weaker than it had ever been. "What kind of proposal?" "Marriage," she said, the word falling from her lips like a stone into still water. "His son Foster for your daughter. Join the ranches, join the water rights, end the bloodshed." William Patterson stared at his only child, the last remaining piece of his beloved wife who had died bringing Willow into the world 22 years ago. "You can't be serious." "Foster Lancaster is a cowboy, just like any other," Willow interrupted, though she knew it wasn't true. Foster Lancaster was notorious throughout the territory not just for his family name but for his skill with both gun and horse. He'd won the county rodeo 3 years running and was said to have tamed the wildest Mustang ever seen in these parts. At 26, he stood to inherit the sprawling Lancaster empire. "He's a Lancaster," her father spat. "His grandfather stole from mine. His father tried to burn us out during the drought of '68, and now they've put a bullet in me. And if we don't do something, they'll put bullets in the rest of us too." Willow stood, her resolve strengthening. "I'm of marrying age, Pa. Most women my age already have children. I wanted better for you, love at the very least." Willow gazed out the window at the vast expanse of their ranch, the land that had been in her family for generations. "Some things are more important than love. Peace is more important. Survival is more important." After 3 days of arguments that left them both exhausted, William Patterson reluctantly agreed to Willow's plan. On a Wednesday morning, she donned her best dress, a blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes, and rode alone to the Lancaster ranch, white handkerchief tied to her saddle horn. The Lancaster property was everything the stories claimed, twice the size of the Patterson spread, with a grand 2-story house that made their own humble home seem like a shack in comparison. As she approached, ranch hands stopped their work to stare, some reaching for their weapons until they noticed her flag of truce. A tall man with silver hair and hard eyes emerged from the house, flanked by 2 younger men with rifles. Henry Lancaster, the patriarch, regarded her with open suspicion as she dismounted. "You're a long way from Patterson land, girl," he called, not moving from the porch. Brave or foolish, I'm not sure which. Willow lifted her chin. I've come to speak with you, Mr. Lancaster. Alone, if possible. Anything you have to say can be said in front of my men. Very well. Willow took a deep breath. I've come with a proposal to end this feud once and for all. Henry Lancaster's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication he was listening. My father's condition worsens daily from the wound your men gave him, she continued, fighting to keep her voice steady. And I suspect you've lost men as well. This feud serves neither family. What are you proposing? Lancaster's voice remained cold. An alliance through marriage. She forced herself to meet his gaze. Between me and your son Foster. A startled laugh erupted from one of the men on the porch, younger than Henry, with the same square jaw and piercing eyes, but with hair the color of sun-bleached wheat rather than silver. Foster Lancaster, she realized, seeing him up close for the first time in years. You can't be serious, Foster said, but his father held up a hand, silencing him. Interesting. Henry Lancaster stroked his beard, studying Willow with newfound curiosity, and the Patterson water rights would be joined with the Lancaster claims, as would our land. One family, one ranch. Willow held her ground, though her heart hammered in her chest. No more bloodshed, no more fear. Pa, you can't actually be considering this, Foster protested, but there was a calculating gleam in the elder Lancaster's eyes that told Willow he was doing exactly that. Come inside, Miss Patterson, Henry Lancaster said finally, gesturing toward the door. Let's discuss the details of this alliance. Foster watched in disbelief as his father led the Patterson girl into their home. This had to be some kind of trick, a distraction while Patterson men positioned themselves for an attack. He scanned the horizon, hand resting on his holster, but saw nothing suspicious in the rolling grasslands surrounding the ranch. Keep watch, he instructed the ranch hands before following his father inside. In the Lancaster parlor, with its leather furniture and hunting trophies, Willow Patterson sat with her back straight and her hands folded primly in her lap, looking for all the world like she was at a church social rather than in the home of her family's greatest enemies. Let me be clear, Henry Lancaster was saying as Foster entered. I have no objection to ending this feud. It's cost me good men and good money, but I won't be swindled. No one is attempting to swindle you, Mr. Lancaster, Willow replied coolly. The terms are simple. I marry your son, our ranches combine, the feud ends. And your father, I'm supposed to believe he'll simply accept a Lancaster as a son-in-law after all these years. My father has agreed to the arrangement, Willow said, though Foster noted the slight hesitation in her voice. He's tired of the fighting, as I'm sure you must be. Foster, Henry turned to his son. You've been uncharacteristically quiet. Foster leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest. Because this is madness. Marry a Patterson, I'd sooner bed down with a rattlesnake. A flush crept up Willow's neck, but she didn't flinch. The feeling is mutual, Mr. Lancaster, I assure you, but sometimes personal feelings must be set aside for the greater good. The greater good, Foster scoffed. Your father's men shot my cousin Thomas last spring. After your men burned our south pasture, Willow countered. We could trade accusations all day, Mr. Lancaster, but it won't change the fact that this feud will destroy both our families if it continues. Henry Lancaster sat back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his weathered face. The girl has a point, Foster. Foster stared at his father in disbelief. You can't seriously be considering this. I'm not just considering it, I think it's the smartest idea I've heard in years. Henry turned back to Willow. However, there would need to be conditions, such as. Willow asked. The marriage would need to be real, not just on paper. I want grandchildren to inherit this land, not more feuding families. Willow's cheeks colored slightly, but she nodded. Of course. And your father would need to sign over the water rights before the wedding, not after. At this, Willow hesitated. I'm afraid that won't be possible. The transfer would happen as part of the marriage contract. Henry's eyes narrowed. You expect a great deal of trust from men who have been shooting at each other for decades. I expect the same trust I'm offering by coming here alone and unarmed, Willow replied. A tense silence fell over the room. Foster studied the Patterson girl woman, really taking in her auburn hair and determined blue eyes. She was beautiful, he had to admit, in a fierce, proud way that reminded him of the wild horses he so loved to break. The thought of marrying her was absurd, and yet— 3 days, Foster said suddenly, drawing surprised looks from both Willow and his father. Give me 3 days with Miss Patterson. If I'm to consider marrying her, I should at least get to know her, and it will give us time to draft a proper contract that satisfies both sides. Henry nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. 3 days here? Willow asked, a hint of alarm in her voice. Alone. You'll be treated with every courtesy due a future Lancaster, Henry assured her, his tone making it clear the decision had been made. We'll send word to your father of your extended stay. Willow clearly wanted to object, but she pressed her lips together and nodded. Very well. 3 days. Excellent. Henry Lancaster stood, effectively ending the discussion. Foster, show Miss Patterson to the guest room. I'll have Martha bring up some refreshments. As his father left the room, Foster found himself alone with Willow Patterson for the first time. She met his gaze without flinching, though he could see the rapid pulse at her throat betraying her nervousness. This way, he said gruffly, gesturing for her to follow him upstairs. Though I should warn you, Miss Patterson, if this is some elaborate trap, you'll regret it. It's not a trap, Mr. Lancaster, she replied, gathering her skirts as she stood. It's desperation. Something in her tone, the raw honesty of it, gave Foster pause. Your father is that bad off, she nodded, not meeting his eyes. The infection has spread, the doctor says. She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. I'll do whatever it takes to bring peace before he dies, even if that means marrying you. Foster led her upstairs without further comment, showing her to the best guest room in the house, one rarely used except when important cattle buyers visited from back east. It overlooked the eastern pasture where the prize horses grazed, the view stretching all the way to the distant mountains. Dinner is at 6, he said, pausing at the door. I expect you'll want to rest after your unexpected negotiations. Willow entered the room, turning to face him with a strange mixture of defiance and vulnerability. I meant what I said, Mr. Lancaster. I want this feud to end. As do I, Miss Patterson. I'm just not convinced marriage is the solution. With that, he closed the door, leaving her alone in enemy territory. That evening, dinner at the Lancaster table was a strained affair. Willow, wearing the same blue dress she had arrived in, having brought no luggage for what she had expected to be a brief meeting, sat stiffly beside Foster. Henry Lancaster presided at the head of the table, while 2 ranch hands brothers named James and Peter, who served as Henry's top men, filled out the remaining seats. The food was surprisingly good roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread that put the Patterson cook's efforts to shame. Willow ate sparingly, acutely aware of Foster's presence beside her. Up close, she could see the scar that ran along his jawline, likely from some ranch accident, and the calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work despite his family's wealth. Miss Patterson, Henry said, breaking the uncomfortable silence, Foster tells me your father's health is poor. Willow set down her fork. Yes, sir. The bullet damaged his lung. The doctor says the infection is spreading. A shame, Henry murmured, though there was little genuine sympathy in his tone. William Patterson and I might be enemies, but he was always a worthy adversary. He still is, Willow replied, a note of steel entering her voice. And with proper medical care, he could recover. Medical care costs money, James remarked from across the table. Word is the Patterson coffers aren't what they used to be. Willow's cheeks burned, but she kept her composure. Our finances are none of your concern. They are if you're proposing to join our families, Foster pointed out. I won't yoke myself to a failing ranch out of pity. The Patterson ranch isn't failing, Willow snapped. We've had a difficult year, that's all. The cattle market has been down, and the raids haven't helped matters. Henry Lancaster studied her over the rim of his wine glass. If what you say is true, and this marriage is to proceed, what do you bring to the Lancaster name besides water rights and an end to hostilities? Willow met his gaze steadily. I bring 22 years of ranching knowledge. I can break a horse, brand a calf, and manage a household budget better than most men in this territory. I speak both Spanish and Blackfoot, which has helped us negotiate fair wages with our workers and peaceful passage through native lands." Foster raised an eyebrow, clearly not having expected such a forthright answer. And she continued, "I can read and write well enough to handle your ledgers and correspondence should the need arise." "Educated are you?" Henry asked, seeming genuinely impressed. "My father believed that women's minds are as capable as men's, even if our roles differ," Willow replied. "I was tutored by a retired schoolteacher from Boston until I was 16. A thoughtful silence fell over the table. Willow could feel Foster's gaze on her but kept her eyes on her plate. "Well," Henry said finally, "it seems you might be more than just a pretty face with water rights, Miss Patterson. Foster could do worse." "Pa," Foster protested, but there was less vehemence in his voice than before. The remainder of the dinner passed in strained small talk about the weather and cattle prices. When the meal ended, Willow excused herself, pleading exhaustion from the day's events. Foster watched her go, finding himself strangely curious about this woman who had the courage to walk into the lion's den with nothing but a marriage proposal as protection. She was nothing like the empty-headed girls from town who batted their eyelashes at him whenever he rode in for supplies. There was substance to Willow Patterson intelligence and a quiet dignity that even their family's blood feud couldn't diminish. "She's a fine-looking woman," his father commented after she had gone. "Strong too, I'd wager. Good breeding stock." Foster grimaced at his father's crude assessment. "She's still a Patterson. Names can change," Henry shrugged, refilling his glass. "And she's right about one thing: this feud needs to end before it kills us all. I'm too old to be dodging bullets, and you're too valuable to the future of this ranch to risk in some meaningless skirmish over water rights. So you're seriously considering this match?" Henry leaned forward, his expression grave. "I'm more than considering it, son. Unless you find some compelling reason against it in the next 3 days, I expect you to marry that girl and secure the future of the Lancaster legacy once and for all." Foster stared at his father in disbelief. "And if I refuse?" "Then you're a bigger fool than I raised you to be," Henry replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Think with your head, not your pride, Foster. That girl is offering us everything we've fought for without another drop of blood being spilled." Later that night, unable to sleep, Foster stepped onto the porch for a smoke. To his surprise, Willow Patterson was already there, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill, gazing up at the star-filled sky. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, striking a match for his cigarette. She startled slightly at his voice but didn't turn. "It's strange to be under a Lancaster roof without keeping one eye open for trouble." Foster moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain a respectable distance. "You're safe here, Miss Patterson. Whatever else we Lancasters might be, we don't harm women." "No, you just shoot their fathers and brothers," she replied, though there was more weariness than venom in her tone. Foster exhaled a cloud of smoke into the night air. "Your people have done their share of shooting too." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sounds the distant lowing of cattle and the gentle whicker of horses from the nearby corral. "Why did you suggest 3 days?" Willow asked suddenly. "You could have rejected the proposal outright." Foster considered the question, surprising himself with his own answer. "Because I wanted to understand what kind of woman would walk willingly into enemy territory and offer herself as a peace treaty. Most people in this valley would call that either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." "And what do you think?" She turned to look at him, her profile silvered by moonlight. "I think you love your father very much," he said softly, "and I think you're more formidable than I gave you credit for." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "That's not an answer, Mr. Lancaster." "No, I suppose it isn't." He took another drag of his cigarette. "The truth is, I don't know what to think of you yet, Miss Patterson, but I'm curious enough to find out." Willow wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "And if you don't like what you discover, then we part ways, no hard feelings, and our families continue trying to kill each other until there's no one left to inherit either ranch." He said it matter-of-factly, but the stark reality of his words hung heavy in the air between them. "A cheerful prospect," Willow murmured. Foster surprised himself by chuckling. "You have a sharp tongue, Miss Patterson, so I've been told." she sighed, turning back to the night sky. My mother had one too, according to my father. He says that's what made him fall in love with her. She never let him get away with anything. Something about the wistfulness in her voice touched Foster in a way he hadn't expected. You never knew her, Willow shook her head. She died bringing me into the world. It's just been Pa and me and the ranch hands who have become like family. Foster nodded, understanding all too well. His own mother had succumbed to influenza when he was 12, leaving a hole in the Lancaster household that had never quite been filled. It's hard, growing up without a mother. Harder still to possibly lose the only parent you have left, Willow replied softly, and Foster caught the gleam of unshed tears in her eyes before she blinked them away. An unexpected urge to comfort her rose within him, but he tamped it down. This woman was still a Patterson, still the daughter of the man who had been his father's sworn enemy for longer than Foster had been alive. And yet, "Get some rest, Miss Patterson," he said, dropping his cigarette and crushing it beneath his boot. "Tomorrow, I'd like to show you the Lancaster ranch. If you're to be its mistress one day, you should know what you're getting yourself into." Willow looked surprised by the offer, then nodded. "I'd like that, thank you." As she turned to go back inside, Foster found himself watching her retreating figure with a mixture of curiosity and something else he couldn't quite name. Whatever happened over the next 3 days, he suspected nothing between the Lancasters and Pattersons would ever be quite the same again. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the kind of crystalline blue sky that made the Montana Territory famous. Willow rose early, having slept fitfully in the unfamiliar bed. She washed her face in the basin provided, wishing desperately for a change of clothes. The blue calico dress she had worn for 2 days now was starting to look decidedly worse for wear. A knock at her door startled her. "Yes," she called, hastily smoothing her hair. "It's Martha, miss," came an older woman's voice. "Mr. Lancaster, the younger Mr. Lancaster, asked me to bring you these." Willow opened the door to find a gray-haired woman with kind eyes holding a stack of folded clothing. "They belonged to Mr. Foster's sister, Emily, before she married and moved to California," Martha explained, setting the clothes on the bed. "He thought you might appreciate a change." Surprised by the thoughtfulness of the gesture, Willow thanked the housekeeper. After Martha left, she examined the clothing: a simple but well-made riding skirt in brown wool, a cream-colored blouse, and a leather vest that had clearly been crafted by skilled hands. Dressed in Emily Lancaster's clothes, which fit remarkably well, Willow made her way downstairs. Foster waited in the entryway, dressed for riding in denim pants, a blue cotton shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat he held in his hands. He looked up as she descended the stairs, his expression unreadable as he took in her appearance. "They suit you," he said simply. "Emily was about your size." "Please thank her for me when you next write," Willow replied, oddly touched by the loan. "I will." Foster opened the front door. "Breakfast is ready in the cookhouse. I thought we'd eat with the men before heading out." The Lancaster cookhouse was a large, airy building where the ranch hands took their meals. As Willow entered with Foster, conversation stopped abruptly, 24 pairs of eyes turning to stare at the Patterson woman in their midst. "Miss Patterson will be joining us this morning," Foster announced, his tone making it clear no comments were welcome. "She's a guest of the family." The men nodded, some murmuring greetings, others simply watching with undisguised curiosity as Foster led Willow to a table where plates of eggs, bacon, and biscuits waited. "Your men seem surprised to see me," Willow observed quietly as they sat down. "They've spent years being told Pattersons are the enemy," Foster replied, passing her a jar of preserves. "Can't blame them for being confused." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Willow spoke again. "Your operation seems larger than I realized. How many men do you employ?" 25 regular hands, more during roundup and branding season," Foster answered. "Your father has 10, 8 now," Willow admitted. "We lost 2 in the last altercation." Foster had the decency to look somewhat regretful. "This feud has cost both sides dearly." "Yes," Willow agreed softly. "It has." After breakfast, Foster saddled 2 horses, his own chestnut stallion and a gentle bay mare for Willow. "She's called Penny," Foster said as Willow stroked the mare's velvety nose. Steady and sweet-tempered, but she can run when asked. She's beautiful, Willow murmured, accepting Foster's help to mount. It felt strange to be assisted by a Lancaster, stranger still to realize how strong his hands were as they circled her waist, lifting her effortlessly into the saddle. They rode out under the massive wooden arch that marked the entrance to the Lancaster ranch. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grassland as Foster led Willow along the eastern boundary of the property. Lancaster land stretches from the river in the south to the foothills in the north, he explained, pointing out landmarks. Nearly 20,000 acres all told. Willow whistled softly, impressed despite herself. The Patterson ranch, while substantial, was less than half that size. And all of it productive, most of it. We run about 3,000 head of cattle and 100 horses. There was pride in Foster's voice as he spoke of the ranch. My grandfather started with nothing but a wagon and a dream. My father turned it into the largest operation in 3 counties. At the expense of smaller ranchers like my father, Willow couldn't help but point out. Foster's expression hardened slightly. Your father had his chances to sell fairly. He chose to fight instead. Because this land has been in our family since before Montana was even a territory, Willow countered. Would you sell your birthright without a fight, Mr. Lancaster? The question hung between them, unanswered, as they crested a hill overlooking a verdant valley where hundreds of cattle grazed peacefully. This is my favorite view on the entire ranch, Foster said after a moment, changing the subject. You can see clear to the mountains on a day like today. Willow had to admit the vista was breathtaking. The patchwork of green pastures, golden hay fields, and the silver ribbon of the river winding through it all created a picture of abundance that made her heart ache with both admiration and envy. It's beautiful, she acknowledged. You've built something remarkable here. Foster glanced at her, seeming surprised by the genuine compliment. Thank you. It's taken generations of hard work. As has our ranch, Willow reminded him gently. They rode in silence for a time, Foster occasionally pointing out features of the property: the north pasture, where the best grazing was found, the old line cabin where hands could shelter during bad weather, the creek that never ran dry, even in the worst droughts. By midday, they had reached the western boundary where Lancaster land bordered Patterson property. The difference was stark on the Lancaster side. Fat cattle dotted lush grassland. On the Patterson side, the herds were thinner, the grass more sparse due to the ongoing water dispute. This is what the feud is really about, Foster said, gesturing to the contrast. The headwaters of Broken Creek rise on our land, but your father claims historical rights to the water. Because the creek was redirected, Willow replied, the old argument coming easily to her lips. Before your grandfather built that dam in '52, the water flowed naturally through Patterson land. Foster sighed, removing his hat to wipe sweat from his brow. And we'll never agree on who was right or wrong back then. But here we are now, with the reality that both ranches need that water to survive. Hence my proposal, Willow said quietly. One family, one ranch, one water source. No more fighting over which side gets to drink. Foster studied her face, his expression thoughtful. It's a practical solution, I'll grant you that. But marriage should be more than a business arrangement, Miss Patterson. Willow met his gaze steadily. In an ideal world, perhaps, but we live here in this world where people are dying over cattle and creek water. Is that all you expect from life? Practicality? There was genuine curiosity in his voice. Willow looked away, her eyes following the path of a hawk circling overhead. I expect to do my duty to my family and our legacy. Anything else is a luxury I can't afford to consider. Foster said nothing for a long moment, then surprised her by touching her hand lightly. Come, there's one more place I want to show you before we head back. He led her along a narrow trail that wound through a stand of pines until they emerged at a small, hidden pond fed by a natural spring. Wildflowers surrounded the water's edge, and dragonflies skimmed across the surface. No one else knows about this place, Foster said, dismounting and helping Willow down from her horse. Not even my father. I found it when I was 12, right after my mother died. It became my refuge. Willow walked to the water's edge, touched that he would share something so personal with her. It's lovely, peaceful. I come here when I need to think, Foster admitted, standing beside her, and I have a lot to think about right now. Willow glanced at him, noting how the dappled sunlight through the trees brought out golden highlights in his wheat-colored hair. For a moment, she allowed herself to really look at the man. She might soon marry the strong line of his jaw, the intelligence in his eyes, the capable hands that could both gentle a horse and draw a gun with equal skill. "What are you thinking about now?" she asked softly. Foster met her gaze, his expression more open than she had yet seen it. "I'm thinking that you're nothing like what I expected, Willow Patterson." It was the first time he had used her given name, and something about the way it sounded in his deep voice made her breath catch slightly. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" she asked. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'm still deciding, but I'm leaning toward good." They stood in companionable silence for a few moments, listening to the gentle lapping of water against the shore and the distant call of birds. "We should head back," Foster said eventually. "Storm clouds gathering to the west. We don't want to get caught in it." As they mounted their horses, Willow found herself unexpectedly reluctant to leave this peaceful place. Something had shifted between them here, a tentative understanding, perhaps, or at least the beginning of one. The ride back to the ranch house was quieter, both of them lost in thought. When they arrived, Henry Lancaster was waiting on the porch, his expression grave. "There you are," he called as they dismounted. "We have a visitor, Foster. William Patterson has come calling for his daughter." Willow's heart sank. Her father should be in bed, recovering, not riding miles across dangerous territory. "Pa's here, is he all right?" Before Henry could answer, the front door opened, and William Patterson emerged, leaning heavily on a cane. His face was pale beneath his beard, but his eyes blazed with familiar determination. "Willow," he said, his voice weaker than she remembered but still carrying the authority that had commanded the Patterson ranch for 30 years. "I've come to take you home." Foster stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Willow in what seemed an almost protective gesture. "Mr. Patterson, you shouldn't be traveling in your condition." William's eyes narrowed as they took in his daughter standing beside Foster Lancaster. "That's for me to decide, boy. I've come for my daughter, and I'm not leaving without her." Henry Lancaster moved to stand beside his son. "She came of her own free will, William, to discuss a matter of importance to both our families." "A matter I never should have agreed to," William retorted. "Marriage to a Lancaster. I must have been delirious with fever to even consider it." Willow stepped around Foster to approach her father. "Pa, you need to be resting. The doctor said—" "I know what the doctor said," William interrupted. "And I know what I saw when I rode up my daughter, wearing Lancaster clothes, looking mighty comfortable with the enemy." "We were just talking, Pa," Willow said, aware of the ranch hands gathering at a distance, watching the confrontation, trying to find a peaceful solution. William's face softened slightly as he looked at his only child. "There can be no peace with Lancasters, Willow. I was a fool to let you believe otherwise. Now come, we're going home." Willow hesitated, torn between obedience to her father and the fragile progress she felt she'd made with Foster. "Pa, please, just stay the night. You're in no condition to ride back today, and there's a storm coming." "Listen to your daughter, William," Henry said, his tone surprisingly conciliatory. "Whatever our differences, I won't turn a sick man out in bad weather. Stay the night. We can all talk in the morning when tempers have cooled." William Patterson looked as though he might refuse, but a fit of coughing overtook him and he sagged against his cane. Willow rushed to support him, and after a moment's hesitation, Foster moved to help as well. "One night," William conceded finally, his pride clearly stung by his weakness. "But I want your word as a man, Henry, that no harm will come to me or my daughter under your roof." "You have it," Henry replied solemnly. "Lancaster honor." "That's worth precious little to me," William muttered, but he allowed Foster and Willow to help him inside, where Martha showed them to adjoining rooms. Once her father was settled in bed, Willow sat beside him, holding his hand. "You shouldn't have come, Pa. You're not strong enough yet." "Had to," he wheezed, his face gray with exhaustion. "Couldn't let my little girl sacrifice herself for a foolish old man's mistakes. It's not a sacrifice if it brings peace, Willow insisted gently, and Foster Lancaster isn't. He isn't what I expected. William's eyes sharpened. Don't tell me you're developing feelings for the boy. No, Willow said quickly, though the denial felt somewhat hollow. But I think he's reasonable. I think we could make this work, Pa. Lancasters have never been reasonable where Pattersons are concerned, William said bitterly. And I won't see you tied to one for life based on one day of pretty talk and writing lessons. Willow sighed, knowing better than to argue with her father when he was in this mood. Rest now, Pa. We can discuss it tomorrow. She sat with him until he fell into an uneasy sleep, then slipped quietly from the room. In the hallway, she nearly collided with Foster, who appeared to have been waiting for her. How is he? Foster asked, genuine concern in his voice. Exhausted, Willow replied. The journey was too much for him in his condition. Foster nodded, rubbing the back of his neck in a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of discomfort. I've asked Dr. Miller to ride out first thing in the morning. He's the best physician in the territory. Surprised by the thoughtfulness, Willow smiled tentatively. Thank you. That's very kind. It's the least I can do, Foster said. After all, it's partly our fault he's in this condition to begin with. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Foster spoke again. I enjoyed our ride today, Miss Patterson, despite the circumstances. So did I, Mr. Lancaster. Willow found herself wishing they could return to the easy conversation they'd shared by the hidden pond, away from the weight of family history and expectations. Willow, Foster said suddenly, his voice low. I've been thinking about your proposal, and whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by a crash of thunder that rattled the windows, followed by the sound of running feet and a shout from downstairs. Foster, it was James, the foreman. The south pasture fence is down and the cattle are scattering in the storm, Foster cursed under his breath. I have to go, he told Willow, already turning toward the stairs. We'll talk tomorrow. Willow watched him disappear down the hallway, wondering what he had been about to tell her. The storm raged outside, rain lashing against the windows as lightning illuminated the darkened landscape in brief, brilliant flashes. She returned to her room, changing into a nightgown Martha had provided, and sat by the window watching the fury of nature unleashed across the land both families claimed as their own. The storm lasted well into the night. Unable to sleep, Willow eventually made her way downstairs to the kitchen in search of tea, only to find Foster there, soaked to the skin and mud-splattered, warming himself by the stove. You're still up, he said, looking surprised to see her. Couldn't sleep, Willow admitted, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders, suddenly aware she was in her nightclothes. The storm, Foster nodded, pouring a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove. It was a bad one. Lost a few head to lightning strikes, but most of the herd is secure now. I'm sorry for your losses, Willow said sincerely, moving to prepare her tea. Goes with ranching territory, Foster replied with a shrug. My father used to say we're all just one storm away from disaster in this business. My father says something similar, Willow remarked, the shared sentiment reminding her of how much the two families had in common despite their feud. Foster watched her as she steeped her tea, his expression thoughtful. Your father is a proud man. He rode all this way, sick as he is, to protect you. He's stubborn, Willow corrected, though there was fondness in her voice, and he's been fighting Lancasters so long he doesn't know how to stop. Maybe neither of our fathers knows how, Foster suggested quietly. Maybe it takes a new generation to find a different way. Willow looked up at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her heart beat a little faster. What are you saying, Foster? He set down his coffee cup and moved closer to her, close enough that she could smell the rain on his clothes and the leather of his vest. I'm saying I think your idea has merit. Marriage between our families could end this feud once and for all. Willow felt a mixture of triumph and unexpected disappointment. So you agree to the arrangement? Not exactly. Foster's voice was low, intimate in the quiet kitchen. I agree that marriage between us makes sense, but I want more than a business arrangement, Willow. She swallowed, suddenly very aware of his proximity. What do you want? A real marriage, he said simply. Not just on paper, not just to satisfy our fathers or unite our land. I want us to try, genuinely try, to build something together, something new." Willow's pulse quickened. "We barely know each other." "I know enough," Foster replied. "I know you're brave and intelligent. I know you love your family and your land enough to marry a man you were raised to hate. I know there's something between us that wasn't there yesterday morning." He was right, and the realization both thrilled and terrified her. In just over a day, Foster Lancaster had gone from being an abstract enemy to a flesh and blood man with depth and complexity, a man she found herself increasingly drawn to. "And if it doesn't work?" she asked softly. "If we try and fail, then at least we tried," Foster said. "But I don't think we'll fail. I think we're both too stubborn to let that happen." A smile tugged at Willow's lips. "Now you sound like my father." "God forbid," Foster chuckled, then grew serious again. "Think about it, Willow. I don't need your answer tonight, but I want you to know that if we do this, I'm committed to making it real." With that, he stepped back, giving her space. "Try to get some rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." As he turned to go, Willow found herself reaching out to touch his arm. "Foster," he paused, looking back at her questioningly. "Thank you," she said simply, "for considering my proposal and for making it something more than I dared hope for." A smile warmed his eyes, transforming his face. "Good night, Willow Patterson." "Good night, Foster Lancaster," she replied, watching him leave the kitchen with the strangest feeling that her life had just changed irrevocably. Morning brought clear skies and the arrival of Dr. Miller, a gray-haired man with spectacles and a gentle manner who spent over an hour examining William Patterson. When he emerged from the bedroom, his expression was grave as he addressed both families gathered in the Lancaster parlor. "Mr. Patterson's condition is serious," he said without preamble. "The infection has weakened his heart. He needs complete rest and more aggressive treatment than he's been receiving." Willow clutched the back of a chair, her knuckles white. "But he can recover," Dr. Miller hesitated. "With proper care and a lot of luck, yes, but not if he continues to push himself. The ride here likely set his recovery back considerably." "He'll receive the best care money can buy," Henry Lancaster said, surprising everyone in the room, "right here until he's strong enough to travel." William Patterson, who had insisted on being present despite the doctor's objections, scoffed from his position on the sofa. "I don't need Lancaster charity, Henry." "It's not charity," Henry replied evenly. "It's common decency, and perhaps a down payment on a new beginning between our families." Willow glanced at Foster, who stood by the window, his expression unreadable. She wondered if he had spoken to his father about their conversation the previous night. "Pa," she said gently, moving to sit beside her father, "please let yourself heal here. I'll stay with you." William looked at his daughter, then at Foster, something like resignation crossing his face. "You really want this alliance, don't you? This marriage?" Willow took a deep breath, aware of everyone watching them. "I want peace, Pa. I want our ranch to thrive again." "And yes, I think Foster Lancaster might be the key to both." Her father studied her face for a long moment, then turned to Foster. "You boy, come here." Foster approached, standing tall before the man who had been his family's enemy for decades. "Sir, you want to marry my daughter?" William asked bluntly. "I do," Foster replied without hesitation. "Why, for land, water rights, to finally claim victory for the Lancaster name." Foster shook his head. "No, sir, because I believe, like Willow, that it's time for this feud to end. And because in the short time I've known your daughter, I've come to respect and admire her more than any woman I've ever met." William's eyebrows rose slightly at the sincerity in Foster's voice. "And if I forbid it, then I would be deeply disappointed," Foster answered honestly. "But I wouldn't force my attentions where they weren't wanted. Willow's happiness matters to me." A tense silence fell over the room as William Patterson considered Foster's words. Finally, he sighed, the sound of a man who had fought too long and was ready to lay down his weapons. "Very well," he said quietly. "If this is truly what you want, Willow, you have my blessing. But," he added, fixing Foster with a hard stare, "if you ever give me reason to believe you've made her unhappy, Lancaster, no amount of water rights or cattle will save you from my wrath, sick as I may be." "Understood," Foster replied solemnly. Henry Lancaster stepped forward, extending his hand to William Patterson. Then it's settled. Our families will be united, the feud ended, the lands joined. After a moment's hesitation, William reached out and clasped Henry's hand, decades of hostility giving way to a fragile truce. Draw up the papers, William told Henry. Let's make this official before either of us changes our mind. Over the next 2 weeks, as William Patterson slowly recovered under Dr. Miller's care, preparations for the wedding moved forward at a remarkable pace. Word spread throughout the valley that the infamous Lancaster-Patterson feud was ending in marriage rather than bloodshed, drawing equal parts skepticism and relief from neighbors who had long stayed clear of both families. Willow divided her time between caring for her father and getting to know Foster better. They rode together daily, exploring the combined lands that would soon be their joint responsibility. With each passing day, Willow found herself more drawn to the man she had once considered her enemy. His quiet intelligence, his devotion to the land, and the gentle way he had with horses all revealed a depth of character she hadn't expected. For his part, Foster discovered that Willow was everything she had claimed to be and more capable, knowledgeable about ranching, and possessed of a quick wit that increasingly made him smile. The idea of marriage, which had begun as a strategic alliance, evolved into something he found himself genuinely wanting. One evening, a week before the wedding, Foster found Willow sitting alone on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "May I join you?" he asked, holding out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Of course," Willow replied, making room for him on the swing. Foster sat beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "I have something for you, a gift." Surprised, Willow accepted the package. "You didn't have to get me anything." "I wanted to," Foster said simply. "Open it." Willow carefully unwrapped the paper to reveal a small leather-bound book. Opening it, she found it was a journal, the pages blank except for an inscription on the first page in Foster's neat handwriting. "For Willow, that we might write our own history free from the burdens of the past. Yours, Foster." Touched beyond words, Willow ran her fingers over the inscription. "It's perfect," she whispered. "I thought," Foster said quietly, "that we could start fresh, record our own story, beginning with our wedding day." Willow looked up at him, moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift and the sentiment behind it. "I'd like that very much." Foster's gaze dropped to her lips, and for a moment Willow thought he might kiss her. Instead, he reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I never thought I'd say this," he murmured, "but I'm looking forward to marrying you, Willow Patterson." "And I you, Foster Lancaster," she replied softly, surprising herself with how true the words felt. The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Foster tensed, old habits dying hard as he instinctively reached for the pistol he no longer wore around the ranch house. A rider approached, silhouetted against the sunset. As he drew closer, Willow recognized Jacob, one of the Patterson ranch hands. "Miss Willow." Jacob called, reining in his horse. "Thank goodness you're here." "What is it, Jacob?" Willow asked, rising from the swing, alarm coursing through her at the urgency in his voice. "It's the ranch," Jacob said, dismounting. "There's been trouble." A group of men rode in yesterday, claiming they were sent by Mr. Lancaster to survey the property boundaries. When Pete questioned them, they pulled guns. "They've taken over the main house, saying the land is now theirs by right." Foster stood, his expression darkening. "What men?" "Not our hands, surely." "No, sir," Jacob replied, eyeing Foster warily. "Strangers. They had papers they claimed were signed by both Mr. Patterson and Mr. Lancaster, transferring ownership." "Forgeries," Foster spat. "Father, we need to," he turned to call for Henry, only to find his father already standing in the doorway, having overheard the conversation. "How many men?" Henry Lancaster asked sharply. "6 that I counted," Jacob answered, armed to the teeth. "They've got Pete and the others locked in the bunkhouse." William Patterson appeared behind Henry, leaning heavily on his cane but with fire in his eyes. "Someone's trying to take advantage of our truce, thinking we're weak with divided attention." Foster looked at Willow, seeing the fear and determination warring in her expression. "We'll handle this," he promised her. "Together." I'm coming with you, she said firmly. Absolutely not, both Foster and William said in unison, then looked at each other in surprise at their agreement. It's my home, Willow insisted. My responsibility. Foster took her hands in his. And soon it will be our home, our shared responsibility, but right now I need to know you're safe while we deal with these men. Please, Willow. Something in his tone, the genuine concern, the lack of condescension made Willow relent. Be careful, she said softly. All of you. Within the hour, Foster had assembled a group of 10 Lancaster men, armed and ready to ride. To his surprise, William Patterson insisted on joining them, despite his weakened condition. It's my land they're threatening, he said stubbornly when Foster tried to dissuade him. I may not be able to fight, but I can damn well be present when you run those vermin off my property. Reluctantly, Foster agreed, though he assigned 2 men specifically to ensure William's safety. As they prepared to depart, Willow approached Foster one last time. Promise me you'll come back, she said, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Foster hesitated, then made a decision. Pulling her close, he kissed her their first kiss, witnessed by both families and ranch hands alike. It was brief but tender, a promise more binding than words. I will, he said simply when they parted. We have a wedding to attend after all. The combined forces of the Lancaster and Patterson ranches rode out together for the first time in history, not against each other, but side by side against a common enemy. It felt significant, Foster thought as they galloped across land that had seen too much bloodshed between their families. They approached the Patterson ranch under cover of darkness, dismounting a mile out to advance on foot. When they reached the edge of the property, Foster held up a hand, signaling the men to stop. We don't know who these men are or what they really want, he said in a low voice. But they've threatened our people and claimed land that isn't theirs to take. We go in quiet, surround the house, and give them one chance to surrender peacefully. And if they refuse, asked one of the Patterson hands, his hand resting on his pistol. Then we show them what happens when someone threatens a Lancaster and a Patterson in the same day, Foster replied grimly. The men nodded, their former enmity forgotten in the face of a new threat. They spread out, encircling the Patterson house where lamplight shone through the windows. Foster and Henry took position at the front with William a safe distance behind. When everyone was in place, Foster stepped forward. You men in the house, he called out, his voice carrying in the night air. This is Foster Lancaster. You're trespassing on Patterson land that's under the protection of both our families. Come out with your hands up and you can leave peacefully. For a long moment, there was silence. Then the front door opened and a man stepped out onto the porch, a rifle held casually in his hands. Even in the dim light, Foster recognized him Silas Blackburn, a notorious land grabber who had been run out of 3 counties for similar schemes. Well, well, Blackburn drawled. If it isn't young Lancaster, heard you and old Patterson were at each other's throats. Seems I heard wrong. You heard what everyone was meant to hear, Henry Lancaster said, stepping up beside his son. But the feud is over, Blackburn, and you've made a serious mistake. Blackburn laughed, a harsh sound in the quiet night. Have I? Seems to me I've got possession of this fine property, and possession is 9/10 of the law, they say. And the other 10th, William Patterson called from behind them, his voice weaker than usual but still commanding, is a bullet between the eyes for men who steal what isn't theirs. Blackburn's smile faltered as he peered into the darkness. William Patterson, heard you were on your deathbed. Reports of my demise have been greatly exaggerated, William replied dryly. Now get the hell off my land before I decide to hasten yours. Foster could sense Blackburn assessing the situation, counting the shadowy figures surrounding the house, weighing his odds. You're outgunned and surrounded, Blackburn, he said evenly. Whatever you were paid to do this, it's not worth dying over. For a tense moment, it seemed Blackburn might resist. Then, with a curse, he lowered his rifle. Boys, he called over his shoulder, seems we've overstayed our welcome. One by one, 5 more men emerged from the house, hands raised. Foster's men quickly disarmed them, while others freed the Patterson hands from the bunkhouse. Who put you up to this? Foster demanded, confronting Blackburn as his men tied the intruder's hands. Blackburn spat on the ground. No one put me up to anything. Heard the Pattersons and Lancasters were finally killing each other off for good. Seemed like a fine time to step in and claim the spoils. Well, you heard wrong, Foster told him coldly. And I suggest you spread the word when you get to whatever jail they throw you in. The Patterson and Lancaster ranches stand together now. Anyone who threatens one threatens both. The county sheriff arrived the next morning to take custody of Blackburn and his men. By then, the combined ranch hands had secured the property and begun assessing any damage. Surprisingly, little had been done. Blackburn had been more interested in claiming the land than destroying it. When they returned to the Lancaster ranch, Willow was waiting anxiously on the porch. At the sight of Foster riding beside her father, both unharmed, the tension visibly drained from her body. She ran to meet them as they dismounted, embracing her father first, then turning to Foster. Without hesitation, she threw her arms around his neck. "You're safe," she breathed. Foster held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I promised, didn't I?" Over the next few days, something fundamental shifted between the two families. Ranch hands who had once eyed each other with suspicion now worked side by side, repairing fences and moving cattle. Henry Lancaster and William Patterson could be found in the evenings sharing a bottle of whiskey and swapping stories that somehow grew more amicable with each glass. And Foster and Willow, free from the immediate pressure of crisis, found time to truly get to know one another. They took long rides together, talking about everything from childhood memories to dreams for the future of their combined lands. They played chess in the evenings, Foster teaching Willow the strategy of the game while she consistently surprised him with her quick grasp of tactics. They read to each other from Foster's extensive library, discovering shared tastes in literature and philosophy. 3 days before the wedding, Foster took Willow back to the hidden pond, now even more beautiful with late summer wildflowers in full bloom around its edges. "I wanted to bring you back here," he explained as they spread a blanket by the water's edge, "because this is the place where I first started to see you as more than just a Patterson." Willow smiled, settling beside him on the blanket. "And what do you see me as now?" Foster reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. "As my future. As the woman I never expected to find, especially not on the other side of a family feud." "It's strange, isn't it?" Willow mused, watching dragonflies dart across the water. "A month ago, if someone had told me I'd be marrying Foster Lancaster willingly, happily, even I'd have thought they were mad." "And now?" Foster asked softly. Willow turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "Now I can't imagine a different path. It's as if all the hatred and fighting were leading us here, to this moment, to each other." Foster touched her cheek gently. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Willow Patterson, and that's something I never thought I'd say to a Patterson." "And I with you, Foster Lancaster," she whispered, leaning into his touch. "Despite your unfortunate last name." He laughed, then kissed her a real kiss this time, unhurried and tender, full of promise for their future together. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Foster reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this for days, waiting for the right moment," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a single diamond. "It was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it." Tears sprang to Willow's eyes as she took in the simple elegance of the ring. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "She would have liked you," Foster said softly, slipping the ring onto her finger. "Strong, intelligent, not afraid to speak your mind." She had those same qualities. Willow looked down at the ring, now hers to wear, symbolizing not just their upcoming marriage but the joining of two families, the healing of old wounds, the beginning of something new and hopeful. 3 more days," she said, leaning her head against Foster's shoulder. "And then we start writing our own history." "The first chapter of many," Foster agreed, holding her close as the afternoon sun dappled through the trees, turning the pond into a mirror of gold. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, with just enough of a breeze to rustle the leaves of the cottonwood trees that had been decorated with ribbons and flowers for the occasion. The ceremony would take place on neutral ground, a meadow halfway between the Lancaster and Patterson ranches, symbolizing the new unity between the families. In the Patterson guest room at the Lancaster house, Willow stood before a full-length mirror. Hardly recognizing herself in the ivory satin gown Martha had altered from Emily Lancaster's wedding dress. The delicate lace at the collar and sleeves softened the simple lines of the dress, and her auburn hair had been arranged in an elegant knot with a few curls framing her face. "You look beautiful, daughter," William Patterson said from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. Though still weak, he had insisted on walking her down the aisle today. "Your mother would be proud." Willow turned to him, blinking back tears. "Do you think she would approve of Foster of all this?" William crossed the room to take her hands in his. "Your mother was the wisest woman I ever knew. She always said hatred was a poison that hurt the one carrying it more than anyone else. I think she would say it's long past time we set that burden down." "I wish she could be here," Willow whispered. "She is, in a way," William said gently, touching the small locket around Willow's neck that contained a tiny portrait of Elizabeth Patterson. "And she'd tell you what I'm telling you now. Be happy, Willow. Love fully. Don't let the past cast shadows on your future." A knock at the door interrupted them. Martha peeked in, smiling broadly. "It's time, Miss Patterson. Everyone's waiting." William offered his arm to his daughter. "Ready to become Mrs. Lancaster?" Willow took a deep breath, then nodded. "Ready, Pa." Outside, nearly 200 people had gathered ranch hands from both properties. Townspeople curious about the union that was ending the territory's most notorious feud, and even a newspaper reporter from Helena who had ridden 3 days to cover the event. A makeshift altar had been erected beneath an arch of wildflowers, where the preacher from Silver Creek waited, Bible in hand. And there, standing tall and handsome in a new black suit, was Foster, his wheat-colored hair combed neatly, his eyes finding Willow immediately as she appeared on her father's arm. The traditional wedding march played on a borrowed piano as Willow and William made their way between the rows of seats. With each step, Willow felt the weight of history, both the bitter past and the hopeful future surrounding them. When they reached the altar, William placed Willow's hand in Foster's, the symbolic gesture powerfully moving to all who witnessed it. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" the preacher asked. "I do," William Patterson replied, his voice strong despite his weakness. With a glad heart and hope for the future. The ceremony itself was brief, but meaningful. Foster and Willow exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising not just love and fidelity, but also a commitment to healing old wounds and building something new together. When Foster slipped his mother's ring onto Willow's finger as her permanent wedding band, many in the audience dabbed at their eyes. "By the authority vested in me," the preacher concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Foster cupped Willow's face gently in his hands and kissed her, sealing their union as cheers erupted from the assembled guests. Even Henry Lancaster, not known for public displays of emotion, could be seen wiping his eyes as he applauded. The celebration that followed was unlike anything the territory had seen before. Tables groaning with food and drink had been set up in the meadow, and musicians played lively tunes as guests from both ranches mingled freely, decades of tension dissolving in the joy of the occasion. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the festivities, Foster led Willow away from the crowd to a quiet spot beneath a cottonwood tree. "Mrs. Lancaster," he said, a smile playing at his lips. "How does it feel?" "Strange," Willow admitted, "but wonderful too. Like putting down a heavy burden I've carried so long I forgot what it was like to be without it." Foster brushed a curl from her face. "I have something for you, a wedding gift." He produced a document from his jacket pocket, unfolding it carefully before handing it to her. Willow scanned it, her eyes widening as she realized what she was reading. "Foster, this is the deed to both properties, rewritten in both our names," he confirmed. "Equal partners, just as we'll be in everything from now on." Overwhelmed by the gesture and all it represented, Willow could only shake her head in wonder. "I came to you proposing a business arrangement, a marriage of convenience to end a feud. How did we end up here?" Foster drew her into his arms. "Perhaps some unions are written in the stars, Willow. Perhaps all the hatred was just a prelude to finding something much stronger." Love, she whispered, the word no longer frightening or foreign on her tongue. Love, he agreed, kissing her softly as the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing them in the day's last light. Later that night, after the guests had departed, and they had retired to the newly prepared master bedroom in the Lancaster house, Foster and Willow consummated their marriage with a tenderness that surprised them both. What might have been merely duty between strangers arranged in marriage became an expression of genuine affection and growing love. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, they talked softly about their plans for the future, combining herds, improving breeding stock, establishing a legacy that would make both their families proud. "I was so alone before," Willow admitted in the darkness, her head resting on Foster's chest. "Even surrounded by ranch hands and my father, I felt isolated, carrying the weight of the Patterson name, the responsibility of the feud." "I know exactly what you mean," Foster replied, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "The loneliness of being Henry Lancaster's son, of knowing the ranch would be mine someday, but never being able to share that burden with anyone who truly understood." "And now?" Willow asked, raising her head to look at him. Foster smiled, his eyes reflecting the moonlight streaming through the window. "Now I'm not alone anymore. Neither of us is." In the months that followed, the newly united Lancaster-Patterson ranch thrived under their joint leadership. Foster's innovative breeding programs, combined with Willow's careful financial management, created an operation that quickly became the envy of the territory. The disputed water rights that had once caused such bitterness now irrigated fields on both sides of the former boundary, supporting more cattle than either ranch had managed separately. William Patterson's health improved steadily under Dr. Miller's continued care, though he never regained his former strength. He and Henry Lancaster, once bitter enemies, became unlikely friends, often spending evenings on the porch trading stories and giving unsolicited advice to their children about running the ranch. A year after the wedding, on a crisp autumn day much like the one they had married on, Willow found Foster by the hidden pond, where he often went to think when faced with difficult decisions. "I thought I might find you here," she said, approaching him with a mysterious smile. Foster rose to greet her with a kiss. "Just thinking about the new breeding stock arriving tomorrow. Is everything all right? You seem different somehow." Willow took his hands in hers, her eyes shining. "Everything is wonderful, Foster, but there's going to be a change around the ranch soon." "What kind of change?" he asked, brow furrowing in concern. "In about 7 months," Willow said softly, placing his hand on her still flat stomach, "there will be a new Lancaster-Patterson joining us." Foster's expression transformed from confusion to wonder as her meaning registered. "We're?" Willow nodded, laughing at his stunned reaction. "Yes, husband, we're going to have a baby." With a whoop of joy, Foster lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a circle before setting her gently back down, suddenly concerned. "Should I not have done that? Are you all right?" "I'm perfectly fine," Willow assured him, amused by his sudden protectiveness. "And very, very happy." Foster pulled her close, his hands cradling her face. "I love you, Willow Lancaster, more than I ever thought possible when you rode onto our ranch with that crazy proposal." "And I love you, Foster Lancaster," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "My enemy, my husband, my heart." They remained by the pond until twilight, talking excitedly about the future, about the child who would be born into a world without the hatred and division that had shaped their own childhoods. A child who would know only the united legacy of 2 families that had found their way from bitter enemies to beloved partners. As they rode home together in the gathering dusk, Willow reflected on how much had changed in just over a year. She had married a Lancaster to end a feud, expecting at best a cordial partnership. Instead, she had found love, companionship, and an end to the loneliness that had shadowed her for so long. The lights of the ranch house glowed in the distance, welcoming them home not to the Lancaster ranch or the Patterson ranch, but to their ranch, their home, their shared future stretching bright and promising before them. When they arrived, both Henry and William were waiting on the porch, engaged in one of their now familiar friendly arguments about the best way to predict the coming winter's severity. "There you two are," William called as they dismounted. "Been looking for you since dinner." "Got some news from town." "We have news too, Pa," Willow said, exchanging a meaningful glance with Foster as they climbed the porch steps hand in hand. "Well, yours can wait," Henry interrupted, uncharacteristic excitement in his voice. "The railroad's coming through, got confirmation today." They're laying track 20 miles south with a spur line coming right to Silver Creek. Foster's eyes widened at the implications. "That changes everything. We could ship directly east without the cattle drives." "Exactly," William nodded enthusiastically. "And that's not all. With the railroad comes more settlers, more business. Silver Creek could become a real town, not just a trading post." "The agent said land values will likely double in the next 5 years," Henry added. "We're sitting on a gold mine, and I don't mean the literal kind." Willow squeezed Foster's hand, seeing the same thought reflected in his eyes. Their child would be born into a changing world, a world of new opportunities and connections. The isolated existence that had bred the feud between their families was giving way to progress. "Your news?" William prompted, noting the silent exchange between them. Foster put his arm around Willow's waist. "We're having a baby." The stunned silence lasted only a moment before both older men erupted in congratulations and questions. Henry Lancaster actually shed tears as he embraced his son, while William kissed his daughter's cheek with trembling lips. "A grandchild," William whispered, joy and wonder in his voice. "Your mother would be so proud, Willow, so very proud." That night, as they prepared for bed, Foster watched Willow brush her hair, struck anew by how fortunate he was. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" he asked. "If you hadn't been brave enough to ride to the Lancaster ranch that day?" Willow set down her brush, turning to face him. "Sometimes, we might still be shooting at each other across property lines. You might have married some simpering girl from town who couldn't tell a branding iron from a fireplace poker." Foster laughed, pulling her into his arms. "And you might have remained the fierce, lonely defender of the Patterson legacy, too busy fighting Lancasters to find happiness." "Instead," Willow murmured, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, "we found each other. And neither of us has to be lonely ever again." Foster placed a gentle hand on her stomach, where their child grew. "Nor will this little one. A Lancaster Patterson, with 2 loving parents and 2 grandfathers who have finally learned that some things are more important than old grudges." "Our own family," Willow said softly, the words still new and wondrous on her tongue. "Our own legacy. The best kind," Foster agreed, kissing her tenderly. "One built on love, not hatred, on unity, not division." As they drifted to sleep in each other's arms, Willow thought about the journal Foster had given her before their wedding. Tomorrow, she decided, she would make a new entry, not just recording the day's events, but capturing this moment of perfect contentment, of a future full of promise. She had married the cowboy to end a feud. In doing so, she had found so much more: the end of loneliness, the beginning of love, and the creation of a new family that would carry forward the best of both their legacies for generations to come.